Section 30 of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Natalie Gray. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6, by Anonymous. Translated by Richard Francis Burton. Section 30. When it was the 617th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that they seized Judar, and carrying him forth of the house under cover of the night, at once packed him off to Suez, where they shackled him, and set him to work as a galley slave. And he ceased not to serve thus in silence a whole year. So far concerning Judar. But as for his brothers, they went in the next morning to his mother, and said to her, Our mother, our brother Judar is not awake. Said she, Do ye wake him? Asked they, Where lieth he? And she answered, With the guests. They rejoined, Haply he went away with them whilst we slept, O mother. It would seem that he had tasted of strangerhood, and yearned to get at hidden hoards. For we heard him at talk with the Moors, and they said to him, We will take thee with us, and open the treasure to thee. She inquired, Hath he then been in company with Moors? And they replied, saying, Were they not our guests yesternight? And she, Most like he hath gone with them, but Allah will direct him on the right way, for there is a blessing upon him, and he will surely come back with great good. But she wept, for it was grievous to her to be parted from her son. Then they said to her, O accursed woman, dost thou love Judar with all this love? Whilst as for us, whether we be absent or present, thou neither joyest in us, nor sorrowest for us. Are we not thy sons, even as Judar is thy son? She said, Ye indeed are my sons, but ye are reprobates who deserve no favor of me. For since your father's death, I have never seen any good in you. Whilst as for Judar, I have had abundant good of him, and he hath heartened my heart, and entreated me with honor. Wherefore it behoveth me to weep for him, because of his kindness to me and to you. When they heard this, they abused her and beat her. After which they sought for the saddlebags, till they found the 2 pairs, and took the enchanted one, and all the gold from one pouch, and jewels from the other of the unenchanted, saying, This was our father's good. Said their mother, Not so, by Allah. It belongeth to your brother Judar, who brought it from the land of the Maghribi. Said they, Thou liest. It was our father's property, and we will dispose of it as we please. Then they divided the gold and jewels between them. But a bramble arose between them concerning the enchanted saddlebags. Salim saying, I will have them, and Salim saying, I will take them. And they came to high words. Then she said, O my sons, ye have divided the gold and the jewels, but this may not be divided, nor can its value be made up in money. And if it be cut in twain, its spell will be voided. So leave it with me, and I will give you to eat from it at all times, and be content to take a morsel with you. If ye allow me aught to clothe me, 'twill be of your bounty, and each of you shall traffic with the folk for himself. Ye are my sons, and I am your mother. Wherefore let us abide as we are, lest your brother come back, and we be disgraced. But they accepted not her words, and passed the night wrangling with each other. Now it chanced that a janissary of the king's guards was a guest in the house adjoining Judar's, and heard them through the open window. So he looked out, and listening, heard all the angry words that passed between them, and saw the division of the spoil. Next morning he presented himself before the king of Egypt, whose name was Shams al-Dawlah, and told him all he had heard. Whereupon he sent for Judar's brothers, and put them to the question, till they confessed. And he took the 2 pairs of saddlebags from them, and clapped them in prison, appointing a sufficient daily allowance to their mother. Now, as regards Judar, he abode a whole year in service at Suez, till one day, being in a ship bound on a voyage over the sea, a wind arose against them, and cast the vessel upon a rock projecting from a mountain, where she broke up, and all on board were drowned, and none get ashore save Judar. As soon as he landed, he fared on inland, till he reached an encampment of Badawi, who questioned him of his case, and he told them he had been a sailor. Now there was in camp a merchant, a native of Jeddah, who took pity on him, and said to him, "Wilt thou take service with me, O Egyptian? And I will clothe thee and carry thee with me to Jeddah." So Judar took service with him, and accompanied him to Jeddah, where he showed him much favor. After a while his master the merchant set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca, taking Judar with him. And when they reached the city, the Cairene repaired to the Haram temple to circumambulate the Kaaba. As he was making the prescribed circuits, he suddenly saw his friend Abd al-Samad the Moor doing the like. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 618th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Judar, as he was making the circuits, suddenly saw his friend Abd al-Samad also circumambulating. And when the Maghribi caught sight of him, he saluted him and asked him of his state, whereupon Judar wept and told him all that had befallen him. So the Moor carried him to his lodging and entreated him with honor, clothing him in a dress of which the like was not, and saying to him, "Thou hast seen the end of thine ills, O Judar." Then he drew out for him a geometric figure, which showed what had befallen Salim and Salim, and said to Judar, "Such and such things have befallen thy brothers, and they are now in the king of Egypt's prison. But thou art right welcome to abide with me, and accomplish thine ordinances of pilgrimage, and all shall be well." Replied Judar, "O my lord, let me go and take leave of the merchant with whom I am, and after I will come back to thee." "Dost thou owe money?" asked the Moor, and he answered, "No." Said Abd al-Samad, "Go thou and take leave of him, and come back forthright, for bread hath claims of its own from the ingenuous." So Judar returned to the merchant and farewelled him, saying, "I have fallen in with my brother." "Go, bring him here," said the merchant, "and we will make him an entertainment." But Judar answered, saying, "He hath no need of that, for he is a man of wealth, and hath many servants." Then the merchant gave Judar 20 dinars, saying, "Acquit me of responsibility." And he bade him adieu, and went forth from him. Presently he saw a poor man, so he gave him the 20 ducats, and returned to the Moor, with whom he abode till they had accomplished the pilgrimage rites, when Abd al-Samad gave him the seal ring that he had taken from the treasure of al-Shamardal, saying, "This ring will win thee thy wish, for it enchanteth and hath a servant by name Al-Ra'ad al-Kasif. So whatever thou hast a mind to of the wants of this world, rub this ring, and its servant will appear and do all thou biddest him." Then he rubbed the ring before him, whereupon the genie appeared, saying, "Atsam, O my lord, ask what thou wilt, and it shall be given thee. Hast thou a mind to people a ruined city, or ruin a populous one? To slay a king, or to rout a host?" "O Ra'ad," said Abd al-Samad, "this is become thy lord. Do thou serve him faithfully." Then he dismissed him, and said to Judar, "Rub the ring, and the servant will appear, and do thou command him to do whatever thou desirest, for he will not gainsay thee. Now go to thine own country, and take care of the ring, for by means of it thou wilt baffle thine enemies, and be not ignorant of its puissance. O my lord, quoth Judar, with thy leave I will set out homewards. Quoth the Maghribi, summon the genie and mount upon his back, and if thou say to him, bring me to my native city this very day, he will not disobey thy commandment. So he took leave of Nur Abd al-Samad and rubbed the ring, whereupon al-Ra'ad presented himself, saying, Atsam, ask, and it shall be given to thee. Said Judar, carry me to Cairo this day. And he replied, thy will be done. And taking him on his back, flew with him from noon till midnight, when he set him down in the courtyard of his mother's house, and disappeared. Judar went in to his mother, who rose weeping, and greeted him fondly, and told him how the king had beaten his brothers, and cast them into jail, and taken the 2 pairs of saddlebags, which, when he heard, it was no light matter to him. And he said to her, grieve not for the past. I will show thee what I can do, and bring my brothers hither forthright. So he rubbed the ring, whereupon its servant appeared, saying, here I am, ask and thou shalt have. Quoth Judar, I bid thee bring my 2 brothers from the prison of the king. So the genie sank into the earth, and came not up, but in the midst of the jail, where Salim and Salim lay in piteous plight and sore sorrow for the plagues of prison, so that they wished for death. And one of them said to the other, by Allah, O my brother, affliction is longsome upon us. How long shall we abide in this prison? Death would be a relief. As he spoke, behold, the earth clove in sunder, and out came al-Ra'ad, who took both up and plunged with them into the earth. They swooned away for excess of fear, and when they recovered, they found themselves in their mother's house, and saw Judar seated by her side. Quoth he, I salute you, O my brothers. You have cheered me by your presence. And they bowed their heads and burst into tears. Then said he, weep not, for it was Satan and covetise that led you to do thus. How could you sell me? But I comfort myself with the thought of Joseph, whose brothers did with him even more than ye did with me, because they cast him into the pit. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 619th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Judar said to his brothers, How could you do with me thus? But repent unto Allah, and crave pardon of him, and he will forgive you both, for he is the most forgiving, the merciful. As for me, I pardon you and welcome you. No harm shall befall you. Then he comforted them, and set their hearts at ease, and related to them all he had suffered, till he fell in with Sheikh Abd al-Samad, and told them also of the seal ring. They replied, O our brother, forgive us this time, and if we return to our old ways, do with us as thou wilt. Quoth he, No harm shall befall you, but tell me what the king did with you. Quoth they, He beat us and threatened us with death, and took the 2 pairs of saddlebags from us. Will he not care? Said Judar, and rubbed the ring, whereupon al-Ra'ad appeared. When his brothers saw him, they were frightened, and thought Judar would bid him slay them. So they fled to their mother, crying, O our mother, we throw ourselves on thy generosity. Do thou intercede for us, O our mother. And she said to them, O my sons, fear nothing. Then said Judar to the servant, I command thee to bring me all that is in the king's treasury of goods and such. Let nothing remain, and fetch the 2 pairs of saddlebags he took from my brothers. I hear and I obey, replied al-Ra'ad, and disappearing straightway, gathered together all he found in the treasury, and returned with the 2 pairs of saddlebags, and the deposits therein, and laid them before Judar, saying, O my lord, I have left nothing in the treasury. Judar gave the treasure to his mother, bidding her keep it, and laying the enchanted saddlebags before him, said to the genie, "I command thee to build me this night a lofty palace, and overlay it with liquid gold, and furnish it with magnificent furniture, and let not the day dawn ere thou be quit of the whole work." Replied he, "Thy bidding shall be obeyed," and sank into the earth. Then Judar brought forth food, and they ate and took their ease, and lay down to sleep. Meanwhile Al-Ra'ad summoned his attendant jinn, and bade them build a palace. So some of them fell to hewing stones, and some to building, whilst others plastered and painted and furnished. Nor did the day dawn ere the ordinance of the palace was complete. Whereupon Al-Ra'ad came to Judar and said to him, "O my lord, the palace is finished and in best order, and it pleased thee to come and look on it." So Judar went forth with his mother and brothers, and saw a palace whose like there was not in the whole world, and it confounded all minds with the goodliness of its ordinance. Judar was delighted with it while he was passing along the highway, and withal it had cost him nothing. Then he asked his mother, "Say me, wilt thou take up thine abode in this palace?" And she answered, "I will, O my son," and called down blessings upon him. Then he rubbed the ring, and bade the genie fetch him 40 handsome white handmaids, and 40 black damsels, and as many Mamelukes and negro slaves. "Thy will be done," answered Al-Ra'ad, and betaking himself with 40 of his attendant genii to Hind and Sind and Persia, snatched up every beautiful girl and boy they saw, till they had made up the required number. Moreover, he sent other 80, who fetched comely black girls, and 40 others brought male chattels, and carried them all to Judar's house, which they filled. Then he showed them to Judar, who was pleased with them, and said, "Bring for each a dress of the finest." "Ready," replied the servant. Then quoth he, "Bring a dress for my mother, and another for myself, and also for my brothers." So the genie fetched all that was needed, and clad the female slaves, saying to them, "This is your mistress. Kiss her hands and cross her not, but serve her white and black." The Mamelukes also dressed themselves, and kissed Judar's hands, and he and his brothers arrayed themselves in the robes the genie had brought them. And Judar became like unto a king, and his brothers as wazirs. Now his house was spacious, so he lodged Salim and his slave girls in one part thereof, and Salim and his slave girls in another, whilst he and his mother took up their abode in the new palace, and each in his own place was like a sultan. So far concerning them. But as regards the king's treasurer, thinking to take something from the treasury, he went in and found it altogether empty, even as saith the poet, "'Twas as a hive of bees that greatly thrived. But when the bee swarm fled, 'twas clean unhived." So he gave a great cry, and fell down in a fit. When he came to himself, he left the door open, and going in to King Shams al-Dawla, said to him, "O commander of the faithful, I have to inform thee that the treasury hath become empty during the night." Quoth the king, "What hast thou done with my monies which were therein?" Quoth he, "By Allah, I have not done aught with them, nor know I what is come of them. I visited the place yesterday and saw it full, but today when I went in, I found it clean empty, albeit the doors were locked, the walls were unpierced, and the bolts are unbroken, nor hath a thief entered it." Asked the king, "Are the 2 pairs of saddlebags gone?" "Yes," replied the treasurer, whereupon the king's reason flew from his head. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. End of section 30. Recording by Natalie Gray. www.voicebynatalie.com.
Section 31 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Novella Serena. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6, by Anonymous. Translated by Richard Francis Burton. Section 31. When it was the 620th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the treasurer informed the king that all in the treasury had been plundered, including the 2 pairs of saddlebags, the king's reason flew from his head, and he rose to his feet, saying, 'Go thou before me.' Then he followed the treasurer to the treasury, and he found nothing there. Whereat he was wroth with him, and he said to them, 'O soldiers, know that my treasury hath been plundered during the night, and I know not who did this deed, and dared thus to outrage me without fear of me.' Said they, 'How so?' And he replied, 'Ask the treasurer.' So they questioned him, and he answered, saying, 'Yesterday I visited the treasury, and it was full. But this morning, when I entered it, I found it empty, though the walls were unpierced and the doors unbroken.' They all marveled at this, and could make the king no answer, when in came the janissary, who had denounced Salim, and said to Shams al-Dawlah, 'O king of the age, all this night I have not slept for that which I saw.' And the king asked, 'And what didst thou see?' 'Know, O king of the age,' answered the khawas, 'that all night long I've been amusing myself with watching builders at work, and, when it was day, I saw a palace ready edified, whose like is not in the world.' So I asked about it, and was told that Judar had come back with great wealth, and Mamelukes and slaves, and that he had freed his 2 brothers from prison, and built this palace, wherein he is as a sultan. Quoth the king, 'Go, look in the prison.' So they went thither, and not finding Salim, returned and told the king, who said, 'It is plain now who be the thief. He who took Salim out of prison it is, who hath stolen my monies.' Quoth the vizier, 'O my lord, and who is he?' And quoth the king, 'Their brother Judar, and he hath taken the 2 pairs of saddlebags. But, O vizier, do thou send him an emir with 50 men to seal up his goods and lay hands on him and his brothers, and bring them to me, that I may hang them.' And he was sore enraged, and said, 'Ho, off with the emir at once, and fetch them, that I may put them to death.' But the vizier said to him, 'Be thou merciful, for Allah is merciful, and hasteth not to punish his servants, whenas they sin against him. Moreover, he who can build a palace in a single night, as these say, none in the world can vie with him, and verily I fear lest the emir fall into difficulty for Judar. Have patience, therefore, whilst I devise for thee some device of getting at the truth of the case, and so shalt thou win thy wish, O king of the age.' Quoth the king, 'Counsel me how I shall do, O vizier.' And the minister said, 'Send him an emir with an invitation, and I will make much of him for thee, and make a show of love for him, and ask him of his estate. After which we will see. If we find him stout of heart, we will use sleight with him, and if weak of will, then do thou seize him, and do with him thy desire.' The king agreed to this, and dispatched one of his emirs, Othman Eyes, to go and invite Judar, and say to him, 'The king biddeth thee to a banquet.' And the king said to him, 'Return not, except with him.' Now this Othman was a fool, proud and conceited. So he went forth upon his errand, and when he came to the gate of Judar's palace, he saw before the door an eunuch, seated upon a chair of gold, who at his approach rose not, but sat as if none came near, though there were with the emir 50 footmen. Now this eunuch was none other than Al-Ra'ad al-Kasif, the servant of the ring, whom Judar had commanded to put on the guise of a eunuch, and sit at the palace gate. So the emir rode up to him, and asked him, 'O slave, where is thy lord?' Whereto he answered, 'In the palace.' But he stirred not from his leaning posture. Whereupon the Emir Othman waxed wroth, and said to him, O pestilent slave, art thou not ashamed, when I speak to thee, to answer me sprawling at thy length like a gallows bird? Replied the eunuch, Off and multiply not words. Hardly had Othman heard this, when he was filled with rage, and drawing his mace, would have smitten the eunuch, knowing not that he was a devil. But Al-Rahad leapt upon him, and taking the mace from him, dealt him 4 blows with it. Now when the 50 men saw their lord beaten, it was grievous to them. So they drew their swords, and ran to slay the slave. But he said, Do ye draw on us, O dogs? And rose at them with the mace, and every one whom he smote, he broke his bones, and drowned him in his blood. So they fell back before him, and fled, whilst he followed them, beating them, till he had driven them far from the palace gate, after which he returned, and sat down on his chair at the door, caring for none. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 621st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the eunuch, having put to flight the Emir Othman, the king's officer, and his men, till they were driven far from Judar's gate, returned and sat down on his chair at the door, caring for none. But as for the Emir and his company, they returned, discomfited and funded, to King Shams-al-Dawla, and Othman said, O king of the age, when I came to the palace gate, I espied an eunuch seated there, in a chair of gold, and he was passing proud, for, when he saw me approach, he stretched himself at full length, albeit he'd been sitting in his chair, and entreated me contumeliously, neither offered to rise to me. So I began to speak to him, and he answered without stirring, whereat wrath get hold of me, and I drew the mace upon him, thinking to smite him. But he snatched it from me, and beat me and my men therewith, and overthrew us. So we fled from before him, and could not prevail against him. At this the king was wroth, and said, Let 100 men go down to him. Accordingly, the 100 men went down to attack him. But he arose and fell upon them with the mace, and ceased not smiting them till he had put them to the rout, when he regained his chair. Upon which they returned to the king, and told him what had passed, saying, O king of the age, he beat us, and we fled for fear of him. Then the king sent 200 men against him, but these also he put to the rout. And Shams-al-Dawla said to his minister, I charge thee, O Vizier, take 500 men, and bring this eunuch in haste, and with him his master Judar and his brothers. Replied the Vizier, O king of the age, I need no soldiers, but will go down to him alone and unarmed. Go, quoth the king, and do as thou seest suitable. So the Vizier laid down his arms, and donning a white habit, took a rosary in his hand, and set out afoot alone and unattended. When he came to Judar's gate, he saw the slave sitting there. So he went up to him, and seating himself by his side courteously, said to him, Peace be with thee. Whereto he replied, And on thee be peace, O mortal. What wilt thou? When the Vizier heard him say, O mortal, he knew him to be of the jinn, and quaked for fear. Then he asked him, O my lord, tell me, is thy master Judar here? Answered the eunuch, Yes, he is in the palace. Quoth the minister, O my lord, go thou to him, and say to him, King Shams-al-Dawla saluteth thee, and biddeth thee honor his dwelling with thy presence, and eat of a banquet he hath made for thee. Quoth the eunuch, Tarry thou here whilst I consult him. So the Vizier stood in a respectful attitude, whilst the Marid went up to the palace, and said to Judar, Know, O my lord, that the king sent to thee an emir and 50 men, and I beat them, and drove them away. Then he sent 100 men, and I beat them also. Then 200, and these also I put to the rout. And now he hath sent thee his Vizier, unarmed, bidding thee visit him and eat of his banquet. What sayest thou? Said Judar, Go, bring the Vizier hither. So the Marid went down, and said to him, O Vizier, come speak with my lord. On my head be it, replied he, and going in to Judar found him seated, in greater state than the king, upon a carpet, whose like the king could not spread, and was dazed and amazed at the goodliness of the palace and its decoration and appointments, which made him seem as he were a beggar in comparison. So he kissed the ground before Judar and called down blessings on him. And Judar said to him, "What is thy business, O Vizier?" Replied he, "O my lord, thy friend, King Shams al-Dawla, saluteth thee with a salam, and longeth to look upon thy face. Wherefore he hath made thee an entertainment. So say, wilt thou heal his heart, and eat of his banquet?" Quoth Judar, "If he be indeed my friend, salute him, and bid him come to me." "On my head be it," quoth the minister. Then Judar, bringing out the ring, rubbed it, and bade the genie fetch him a dress of the best, which he gave to the vizier, saying, "Don this dress, and go tell the king what I say." So the vizier donned the dress, the like whereof he had never donned, and returning to the king told him what had passed, and praised the palace, and that which was therein, saying, "Judar biddeth thee to him." So the king called out, "Up, ye men! Mount your horses, and bring me my steed, that we may go to Judar." Then he and his suite rode off for the Cairene palace. Meanwhile, Judar summoned the Marid, and said to him, "It is my will that thou bring me some of the Ifrits at thy command in the guise of guards, and station them in the open square before the palace, that the king may see them and be awed by them, so that his heart may tremble, and he shall know that my power and majesty be greater than his." Thereupon Al-Ra'ad brought him 200 Ifrits of great stature and strength in the guise of guards, magnificently armed and equipped. And when the king came and saw these tall burly fellows, his heart feared them. Then he entered the palace, and found Judar sitting in such state as nor king nor sultan could even. So he saluted him, and made his obeisance to him. Yet Judar rose not to him, nor did him honor, nor said, "Be seated," but left him standing. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 622nd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the king entered, Judar rose not to him, nor did him honor, nor even said, 'Be seated,' but left him standing, so that fear entered into him, and he could neither sit nor go away, and said to himself, 'If he feared me, he would not leave me thus unheeded. Peradventure he will do me a mischief, because of what I did with his brothers.' Then said Judar, 'O king of the age, it beseemeth not the like of thee to wrong the folk, and take away their good.' Replied the king, 'O my lord, deign excuse me, for greed impelled me to this, and fate was thereby fulfilled. And, were there no offending, there would be no forgiving.' And he went on to excuse himself for the past, and prayed to him for pardon and indulgence, till he recited amongst other things this poetry. O thou of generous seed and true nobility, reproach me not for that which came from me to thee. We pardon thee if thou have wrought us any wrong, and if I wrought the wrong, I pray thee pardon me." And he ceased not to humble himself before him, till he said, "Allah pardon thee," and bade him be seated. So he sat down, and Judar invested him with garments of pardon and immunity, and ordered his brothers spread the table. When they had eaten, he clad the whole of the king's company in robes of honor, and gave them largesse, after which he bade the king depart. So he went forth, and thereafter came every day to visit Judar, and held not his divan, save in his house. Wherefore friendship and familiarity waxed great between them, and they abode thus a while, till one day the king, being alone with his minister, said to him, "O Vizier, I fear lest Judar slay me and take the kingdom away from me." Replied the vizier, "O king of the age, as for his taking the kingdom from thee, have no fear of that, for Judar's present estate is greater than that of the king, and to take the kingdom would be a lowering of his dignity. But if thou fear that he kill thee, thou hast a daughter. Give her to him to wife, and thou and he will be of one condition." Quoth the king, "O Vizier, be thou intermediary between us and him." And quoth the minister, "Do thou invite him to an entertainment, and pass the night with him in one of thy saloons. Then bid thy daughter don her richest dress and ornaments, and pass by the door of the saloon. When he seeth her, he will assuredly fall in love with her. And when we know this, I will turn to him, and tell him that she is thy daughter, and engage him in converse, and lead him on, so that thou shalt seem to know nothing of the matter till he ask her to thee to wife. When thou hast married him to the princess, thou and he will be as one thing, and thou wilt be safe from him. And if he die, thou wilt inherit all he hath, both great and small. Replied the king, Thou sayest sooth, O my vizier, and made a banquet, and invited thereto Judar, who came to the Sultan's palace, and they sat in the saloon in great good cheer till the end of the day. Now the king had commanded his wife to array the maiden in her richest raiment and ornaments, and carry her by the door of the saloon. She did as he told her, and when Judar saw the princess, who had not her match for beauty and grace, he looked fixedly at her, and said, Ah! And his limbs were loosened, for love and longing and passion and pine were sore upon him. Desire and transport get hold upon him, and he turned pale. Quoth the vizier, May no harm befall thee, O my lord. Why do I see thee change colour, and in suffering? Asked Judar, O vizier, whose daughter is this damsel? Verily she hath enthralled me and ravished my reason. Replied the vizier, She is the daughter of thy friend the king, and if she please thee, I will speak to him that he marry thee to her. Quoth Judar, Do so, O vizier, and as I live, I will bestow on thee what thou wilt, and will give the king whatsoever he shall ask to her dowry, and we will become friends and kinsfolk. Quoth the minister, It shall go hard, but thy desire be accomplished. Then he turned to the king and said in his ear, O king of the age, thy friend Judar seeketh alliance with thee, and will have me ask of thee for him the hand of thy daughter, the Princess Asiyah. So disappoint me not, but accept my intercession, and what dowry soever thou askest, he will give thee. Said the king, The dowry I have already received, and as for the girl, she is his handmaid. I give her to him to wife, and he will do me honor by accepting her. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of section 31. Recording by Novella Serena.
Section 32 of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6, by Anonymous, translated by Richard Francis Burton. Section 32. When it was the 623rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the wazir whispered the king, Judar seeketh alliance with thee by taking thy daughter to wife, the other replied, The dowry I have already received, and the girl is his handmaid. He will do me honor by accepting her. So they spent the rest of that night together, and on the morrow the king held a court, to which he summoned great and small, together with the Sheikh al-Islam. Then Judar demanded the princess in marriage, and the king said, The dowry I have received. Thereupon they drew up the marriage contract, and Judar sent for the saddlebags containing the jewels, and gave them to the king as settlement upon his daughter. The drums beat, and the pipes sounded, and they held high festival, whilst Judar went in unto the girl. Thenceforward he and the king were as one flesh, and they abode thus for many days, till Shams al-Dawla died. Whereupon the troops proclaimed Judar sultan, and he refused. But they importuned him till he consented, and they made him king in his father-in-law's stead. Then he bade build a cathedral mosque over the late king's tomb in the Bandukaniya quarter, and endowed it. Now the quarter of Judar's house was called Yamaniya, but when he became sultan, he built therein a congregational mosque and other buildings. Wherefore the quarter was named after him, and was called the Judariya quarter. Moreover, he made his brother Salim his wazir of the right, and his brother Salim his wazir of the left hand. And thus they abode a year and no more. For at the end of that time Salim said to Salim, O my brother, how long is this state to last? Shall we pass our whole lives in slavery to our brother Judar? we shall never enjoy luck or lordship whilst he lives, adding, So how shall we do to kill him and take the ring and the saddle-bags? Replied Salim, Thou art craftier than I. Do thou devise whereby we may kill him. If I effect this, asked Salim, wilt thou agree that I be Sultan and keep the ring, and that thou be my right hand, Wazir, and have the saddle-bags? Salim answered, I consent to this. And they agreed to slay Judar their brother for love of the world and of dominion. So they laid a snare for Judar, and said to him, O our brother, verily we have a mind to glory in thee, and would fain have thee enter our houses, and eat of our entertainment, and solace our hearts. Replied Judar, So be it. In whose house shall the banquet be? In mine, said Salim, and after thou hast eaten of my victual, thou shalt be the guest of my brother. Said Judar, 'Tis well, and went with him to his house, where he set before him poisoned food, of which when he had eaten, his flesh rotted from his bones, and he died. Then Salim came up to him, and would have drawn the ring from his finger, but it resisted him. So he cut off the finger with a knife. Then he rubbed the ring, and the Marid presented himself, saying, Adsum, ask what thou wilt. Quoth Salim, Take my brother Salim, and put him to death, and carry forth the two bodies, the poisoned and the slaughtered, and cast them down before the troops. So the Marid took Salim, and slew him. Then carrying the two corpses forth, he cast them down before the chief officers of the army, who were sitting at table in the parlor of the house. When they saw Judar and Salim slain, they raised their hands from the food, and fear get hold of them, and they said to the Marid, Who hath dealt thus with the Sultan and the Wazir? Replied the genie, Their brother Salim. And behold, Salim came up to them, and said, O soldiers, eat and make merry, for Judar is dead, and I have taken to me the seal ring, whereof the Marid before you is the servant. And I bade him slay my brother Salim, lest he dispute the kingdom with me, for he was a traitor, and I feared lest he should betray me. So now I am become Sultan over you. Will ye accept of me? If not, I will rub the ring, and bid the Marid slay you all, great and small. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 624th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Salim said to the officers, Will ye accept me as your Sultan? Otherwise I will rub the ring, and the Marid shall slay you all, great and small. They replied, We accept thee to king and Sultan. And then he bade bury his brothers, and summoned the divan. And some of the folk followed the funeral, whilst others forewent him in state procession to the audience hall of the palace, where he sat down on the throne, and they did homage to him as king. After which he said, It is my will to marry my brother Judar's wife. Quoth they, Wait till the days of widowhood are accomplished. Quoth he, I know not days of widowhood, or aught else. As my head liveth, I needs must go in unto her this very night. So they drew up the marriage contract, and sent to tell the Princess Asiyah, who replied, Bid him enter. Accordingly he went in to her, and she received him with a show of joy and welcome. But by and by she gave him poison in water, and made an end of him. Then she took the ring, and broke it, that none might possess it thenceforward, and tore up the saddle-bags. After which she sent to the Shaykh al-Islam, and other great officers of state, telling them what had passed, and saying to them, Choose you out a king to rule over you. And this is all that hath come down to us of the story of Judar and his brethren. But I have also heard, O king, a tale called The History of Gharib and his brother Ajib. There was once in olden time a king of might, Kundamir Hize, who had been a brave and doughty man of war, a Kahraman in his day, but was grown passing old and decrepit. Now it pleased Allah to vouchsafe him, in his extreme senility, a son, whom he named Ajib, the Wonderful, because of his beauty and loveliness. So he committed the babe to the midwives and wet nurses and handmaids and serving women, and they reared him till he was full 7 years old, when his father gave him in charge to a divine of his own folk and faith. The priest taught him the laws and tenets of their misbelief, and instructed him in philosophy and all manner of other knowledge. And it needed but 3 full told years ere he was proficient therein, and his spirit waxed resolute and his judgment mature. And he became learned, eloquent, and philosophic, consorting with the wise and disputing with the doctors of the law. When his father saw this of him, it pleased him, and he taught him to back the steed, and stab with spear, and smite with sword, till he grew to be an accomplished cavalier, versed in all martial exercises. And by the end of his 20th year he surpassed in all things all the folk of his day. But his skill in weapons made him grow up a stubborn tyrant and a devil arrogant, using to ride forth a hunting and a chasing amongst 1,000 horsemen, and to make raids and razzias upon the neighboring knights, cutting off caravans and carrying away the daughters of kings and nobles. Wherefore many brought complaints against him to his father, who cried out to 5 of his slaves, and when they came, said, "Seize this dog." So they seized Prince Ajib, and pinioning his hands behind him, beat him by his father's command till he lost his senses, after which the king imprisoned him in a chamber so dark one might not know heaven from earth or length from breadth. And there he abode 2 days and a night. Then the emirs went into the king, and kissing the ground between his hands, interceded with him for the prince, and he released him. So Ajib bore with his father for 10 days, at the end of which he went into him as he slept by night, and smote his neck. When the day rose, he mounted the throne of his sire's estate, and bade his men arm themselves cap a pied in steel, and stand with drawn swords in front of him, and on his right hand and on his left. By and by the emirs and captains entered, and finding their king slain and his son Ajib seated on the throne, were confounded in mind, and knew not what to do. But Ajib said to them, O folk, verily ye see what your king hath gained. Whoso obeyeth me, I will honor him, and whoso gainsayeth me, I will do with him that which I did with my sire. When they heard these words, they feared lest he do them a mischief. So they replied, Thou art our king, and the son of our king, and kissed ground before him. Whereupon he thanked them, and rejoiced in them. Then he bade bring forth money and apparel, and clad them in sumptuous robes of honor, and showered largesse upon them. Wherefore they all loved him, and obeyed him. In like manner he honored the governors of the provinces, and the sheikhs of the Badawin, both tributary and independent, so that the whole kingdom submitted to him, and the folk obeyed him, and he reigned, and bade, and forbade in peace and quiet for a time of 5 months. One night, however, he dreamed a dream as he lay slumbering, whereupon he awoke trembling, nor did sleep visit him again till morning. As soon as it was dawn, he mounted his throne, and his officers stood before him, right and left. Then he called the Oneiromantes and the astrologers, and said to them, Expound to me my dream. What was the dream? Asked they. And he answered, As I slept last night, I saw my father standing before me, with his yard uncovered. And there came forth of it a thing the bigness of a bee, which grew till it became as a mighty lion, with claws like hangers. As I lay wondering at this, lo, it ran upon me, and smiting me with its claws, rent my belly in sunder. Whereupon I awoke, startled and trembling. So expound ye to me the meaning of this dream. The interpreters looked one at other, and after considering, said, O mighty king, this dream pointeth to one born of thy sire, between whom and thee shall befall strife and enmity, wherein he shall get the better of thee. So be on thy guard against him, by reason of this thy vision. When Ajib heard their words, he said, I have no brother whom I should fear. So this your speech is mere lying. They replied, We tell thee naught save what we know. But he was anangered with them, and bastinadoed them. Then he arose, and going into the paternal palace, examined his father's concubines, and found one of them 7 months gone with child. Whereupon he gave an order to 2 of his slaves, saying, Take this damsel, ye twain, and carry her to the seashore, and drown her. So they took her forthright, and going to the seashore, designed to drown her. When they looked at her, and seeing her to be of singular beauty and loveliness, said to each other, Why should we drown this damsel? Let us rather carry her to the forest, and live with her there in rare love liasse. Then they took her, and fared on with her days and nights, till they had borne her afar off, and had brought her to a bushy forest, abounding in fruit trees and streams, where they both thought at the same time to win their will of her. But each said, I will have her first. So they fell out one with the other concerning this, and while so doing, a company of blackamoors came down upon them. And they drew their swords, and both sides fell to, laying on load. The melee waxed hot with cut and thrust, and the 2 slaves fought their best, but the blacks slew them both in less than the twinkling of an eye. So the damsel abode alone, and wandered about the forest, eating of its fruits and drinking of its founts, till in due time she gave birth to a boy, brown but clean-limbed and comely, whom she named Gharib, the stranger, by reason of her strangerhood. Then she cut his navel-string, and wrapping him in some of her own clothes, gave him to suck, harrowed at heart, and with vitals sorrowing for the estate she had lost, and its honour and solace. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 625th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that the damsel abode in the bush, harrowed at heart and a-sorrowed. But she suckled her babe, albeit she was full of grief and fear for her loneliness. Now behold, one day there came horsemen and footmen into the forest with hawks and hounds, and horses laden with partridges, and cranes, and wild geese, and divers other waterfowl, and young ostriches, and hares, and gazelles, and wild oxen, and lynxes, and wolves, and lions. Presently these Arabs entered the thicket, and came upon the damsel sitting with her child on her breast a-suckling him. So they drew near, and asked her, Say, art thou a mortal, or a Jinniyah? Answered she, I am a mortal, O chiefs of the Arabs. Thereupon they told her Emir, whose name was Mardas, principal of the Banu Katan, and who had come forth that day to hunt with 500 of his cousins and the nobles of his tribe, and who in the course of the chase had happened upon her. He bade them bring her before him, which they did, and she related to him her past from first to last, whereat he marvelled. Then he cried to his kinsman and escort to continue the chase, after which they took her and returned to their encampment, where the Emir appointed her a separate dwelling place and 5 damsels to serve her, and he loved her with exceeding love, and went in to her and lay with her. She conceived by him straightway, and when her months were accomplished, she bare a man-child, and named him Sahim al-Layl. He grew up with his brother Gharib among the nurses, and throve and waxed upon the lap of the Emir Mardas, who in due time committed the 2 boys to a faqih for instruction in the things of their faith. After which he gave them in charge to a valiant of knights of the Arabs, for training them to smite with sword, and lunge with lance, and shoot with shaft. So by the time they reached the age of 15, they knew all they needed, and surpassed each and every brave of their tribe. For Gharib would undertake 1,000 horse, and Sahim al-Layl no fewer. Now Mardas had many enemies, and the men of his tribe were the bravest of all the Arabs, being doughty cavaliers, none might warm himself at their fire. In his neighborhood was an Emir of the Arabs, Hassan bin Sabit Hayt, who was his intimate friend, and he took to wife a noble lady of his tribe, and bade all his friends to the wedding, amongst them Mardas, lord of the Banu Katan, who accepted his invitation, and set forth with 300 riders of his tribe, leaving other 400 to guard the women. Hassan met him with honor, and seated him in the highest stead. Then came all the cavaliers to the bridal, and he made them bride feasts, and held high festival by reason of the marriage, after which the Arabs departed to their dwelling places. When Mardas came in sight of his camp, he saw slain men lying about, and birds hovering over them right and left, and his heart sank within him at the sight. Then he entered the camp, and was met by Gharib, clad in complete suit of ring-mail, who gave him joy of his safe return. Quoth Mardas, What meaneth this case, O Gharib? And quoth Gharib, Al-Hamal bin Majid attacked us with 500 horsemen of his tribe. Now the reason of this was that the Emir Mardas had a daughter called Madiyah. Seer never saw a fairer than she, and Al-Hamal, lord of the Banu Naban, heard of her charms, whereupon he took horse with 500 of his men, and rode to Mardas to demand her hand. But he was not accepted, and was sent away disappointed. So he awaited till Mardas was absent on his visit to Hassan, when he mounted with his champions, and falling upon the camp of the Banu Katan, slew a number of their knights, and the rest fled to the mountains. Now Gharib and his brother had ridden forth a-hunting and chasing with 100 horse, and returned not till midday, when they found that Al-Hamal had seized the camp and all therein, and had carried off the maidens, among whom was Madiyah, driving her away with the captives. When Gharib saw this, he lost his wits for rage, and cried out to Sahim, saying, O my brother, O son of an accursed dam, They have plundered our camp, and carried off our women and children. Up and at the enemy, that we may deliver the captives." So Gharib and Sahim and their 100 horse rushed upon the foe, and Gharib's wrath redoubled, and he reaped a harvest of heads slain, given the champion's death cup to drain, till he won to Al-Hamal and saw Mahdiyah among the captives. Then he drave at the lord of the Banu Naban braves. With his lance lunged him, and from his destrier hurled him. Nor was the time of mid-afternoon prayer come before he had slain the most part of the foe, and put to rout the rest, and rescued the captives. Whereupon he returned to the camp in triumph, bearing the head of Al-Hamal on the point of his lance, and improvising these couplets: "I am he who is known on the day of fight, and the Jinn of earth at my shade take fright. And a sword have I when my right hand wields, death hastens from left on mankind to alight. I have eke a lance, and who look thereon, see a crescent head of the liveliest light. And Gharib I'm highs of my tribe the brave, and if few my men I feel naught affright." Hardly had Gharib made an end of these verses, when up came Mardas, who, seeing the slain and the vultures, was sore troubled, and with fluttering heart asked the cause. The youth, after due greetings, related all that had befallen the tribe in his stepsire's absence. So Mardas thanked him, and said, "Thou hast well requited our fosterage pains in rearing thee, O Gharib." Then he alighted and entered his pavilion, and the men stood about him, all the tribe praising Gharib, and saying, "O our Emir, but for Gharib not one of the tribe had been saved." And Mardas again thanked him. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. End of Section 32. Recording by Bill Borst. Section 33 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6, by Anonymous, translated by Richard Francis Burton. Section 33. When it was the 626th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Mardas, hearing the tribesmen's praises of Gharib, again thanked him for his daring do. But the youth, when he had delivered Mahdiyah from Al-Hamal, whom he slew, was smitten by the shaft of her glances, and fell into the nets of her allurements. Wherefore his heart could not forget her, and he became drowned in love and longing, and the sweets of sleep forsook him, and he had no joy of drink or meat. He would spur his horse up to the mountain tops, where he would spend the day in composing verses, and return at nightfall. And indeed, manifest upon him were the signs of affection and distraction. He discovered his secret to one of his companions, and it became noised abroad in the camp, till it reached the ears of Mardas, who thundered and lightened, and rose up and sat down, and sparked and snorted, and reviled the sun and the moon, saying, "This is the reward of him who reareth the sons of adultery. But except I kill Gharib, I shall be put to shame." Then he consulted one of the wise men of his tribe, and after telling his secret, took counsel with him of killing the youth. Quoth the elder, "O Emir, 'twas but yesterday that he freed thy daughter from captivity. If there be no help for it, but thou must slay him, let it be by the hand of another than thyself, so none of the folk may misdoubt of thee." Quoth Mardas, "Advise me how I may do him die, for I look to none but to thee for his death." "O Emir," answered the other, "wait till he go forth to hunt and chase. When do thou take 100 horse, and lie in wait for him in some cave, till he pass. Then fall upon him unawares, and cut him in pieces, so shalt thou be quit of his reproach." Said Mardas, "This should serve me well," and chose out 150 of his furious knights and Amalekites, whom he lessoned to his will. Then he watched Gharib, till one day he went forth to hunt, and rode far away amongst the dells and hills. Whereupon Mardas followed him with his men, ill-omened wights, and lay in wait for him by the way against he should return from the chase, that they might sally forth and slay him. But as they lay in ambush among the trees, behold, there fell upon them 500 true Amalekites, who slew 60 of them, and made 80 prisoners, and trussed up Mardas with his arms behind his back. Now the reason of this was that when Gharib put Al-Hamal and his men to the sword, the rest fled, and ceased not flying till they reached their lord's brother, and told him what had happened. Whereat his doom-day rose, and he gathered together his Amalekites, and choosing out 500 cavaliers, each 50 ells high, set out with them in quest of blood revengement for his brother. By the way he fell in with Mardas and his companions, and there happened between them what happened. After which he bade his men alight and rest, saying, O folk, the idols have given us an easy brood-reek. So guard ye Mardas and his tribesmen, till I carry them away, and do them die with the foulest of deaths. When Mardas saw himself a prisoner, he repented of what he had done, and said, This is the reward of rebelling against the Lord. Then the enemy passed the night, rejoicing in their victory, while Mardas and his men despaired of life and made sure of doom. So far concerning them. But as regards Sahim al-Layl, who had been wounded in the fight with Al-Hamal, he went in to his sister Medea, and she rose to him and kissed his hands, saying, May thy 2 hands ne'er wither, nor thine enemies have occasion to be blither. But for thee and Gharib we had not escaped captivity among our foes. Know, however, O my brother, that thy father hath ridden forth with 150 horse, purposing to slaughter Gharib, and thou wottest it would be sore loss and foul wrong to slay him, for that it was he who saved your shame and rescued your good. When Sahim heard this, the light in his sight became night. He donned his battle harness, and mounting steed, rode for the place where Gharib was a-hunting. He presently came up with him, and found that he had taken great plenty of game. So he accosted him, and saluted him, and said, O my brother, why didst thou go forth without telling me? Replied Gharib, By Allah, naught hindered me but that I saw thee wounded, and thought to give thee rest. Then said Sahim, O my brother, beware of my sire, and told him how Mardas was abroad with 150 men seeking to slay him. Quoth Gharib, Allah shall cause his treason to cut his own throat. Then the brothers set out campwards, but night overtook them by the way, and they rode on in darkness, till they drew near the wadi wherein the enemy lay, and heard the neighing of steeds in the gloom. Whereupon said Sahim, O my brother, my father and his men are ambushed in yonder valley. Let us flee from it. But Gharib dismounted, and throwing his bridle to his brother, said to him, Stay in this stead till I come back to thee. Then he went on till he drew in sight of the folk, when he saw that they were not of his tribe, and heard them naming Mardas, and saying, We will not slay him, save in his own land. Wherefore he knew that Nuncle Mardas was their prisoner, and said, By the life of Medea, I will not depart hence till I have delivered her father, that she may not be troubled. Then he sought, and ceased not seeking, till he hit upon Mardas, and found him bound with cords. So he sat down by his side, and said to him, Heaven deliver thee, O uncle, from these bonds and this shame. When Mardas saw Gharib, his reason fled, and he said to him, O my son, I am under thy protection, so deliver me in right of my fosterage of thee. Quoth Gharib, If I deliver thee, wilt thou give me Medea? Quoth the Emir, O my son, by whatso I hold sacred, she is thine to all time. So he loosed him, saying, Make for the horses, for thy son Sahim is there. And Mardas crept along like a snake till he came to his son, who rejoiced in him and congratulated him on his escape. Meanwhile, Gharib unbound one after another of the prisoners, till he had freed the whole 90, and they were all far from the foe. Then he sent them their weapons and war horses, saying to them, Mount ye, and scatter yourselves round about the enemy, and cry out, Ho, sons of Catan! And when they awake, do ye remove from them, and encircle them in a thin ring. So he waited till the last and third watch of the night, when he cried out, Ho, sons of Catan! And his men answered in like guise, crying, Ho, sons of Catan! as with one voice. And the mountains echoed their slogan, so that it seemed to the raiders as though the whole tribe of Banu Catan were assailing them. Wherefore they all snatched up their arms and fell upon one another. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 627th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the raiders awoke from sleep, and heard Gharib and his men crying out, Ho, sons of Catan! They imagined that the whole tribe was assailing them. Wherefore they snatched up their arms, and fell one upon other with mighty slaughter. Gharib and his men held aloof, And they fought one another till daybreak, when Gharib and Mardas and their 90 warriors came down upon them and killed some of them, and put the rest to flight. Then the Banu Qahtan took the horses of the fugitives and the weapons of the slain, and returned to their tribal camp, whilst Mardas could hardly credit his deliverance from the foe. When they reached the encampment, the stay-at-home folk all came forth to meet them, and rejoiced in their safe return. Then they alighted, and betook them to their tents, and all the youths of the tribe flocked to Gharib's stead, and great and small saluted him, and did him honour. But when Mardas saw this, and the youths encircling his stepson, he waxed more jealous of Gharib than before, and said to his kinsfolk, Verily, hatred of Gharib groweth on my heart, and what irketh me most is that I see these flocking about him. And tomorrow he will demand Mahdiyah of me. Quoth his confidant, O Emir, ask of him somewhat he cannot avail to do. This pleased Mardas, who passed a pleasant night, and on the morrow, as he sat on his stuffed carpet with the Arabs about him, Gharib entered, followed by his men and surrounded by the youth of the tribe, and kissed the ground before Mardas, who, making a show of joy, rose to do him honour, and seated him beside himself. Then said Gharib, O uncle, thou madest me a promise, do thou fulfil it. Replied the Emir, O my son, she is thine to all time, but thou lackest wealth. Quoth Gharib, O uncle, ask of me what thou wilt, and I will fall upon the Emirs of the Arabs in their houses, and on the kings in their towns, and bring thee fee enough to fence the land from east to west. O my son, quoth Mardas, I have sworn by all the idols that I would not give Mahdiyah, save to him who should take my blood white of mine enemy, and do away my reproach. O uncle, said Gharib, tell me with which of the kings thou hast a feud, that I may go to him, and break his throne upon his pate. O my son, replied Mardas, I once had a son, a champion of champions, and he went forth one day to chase and hunt with 100 horse. They fared on from valley to valley, till they had wandered far away amongst the mountains, and came to the Wadi of Blossoms and the castle of Ham bin Shays bin Shaddad bin Khalad. Now in this place, O my son, dwelleth a black giant, 70 cubits high, who fights with trees from their roots uptorn. And when my son reached his wadi, the tyrant sallied out upon him and his men, and slew them all, save 3 braves, who escaped and brought me the news. So I assembled my champions, and fared forth to fight the giant, but could not prevail against him. Wherefore I was balked of my revenge, and swore that I would not give my daughter in marriage, save to him who should avenge me of my son. Said Gharib, O uncle, I will go to this Amalekite, and take the wreak of thy son on him, with the help of Almighty Allah. And Mardas answered, saying, O Gharib, if thou get the victory over him, thou wilt gain of him such booty of wealth and treasures as fires may not devour. Cried Gharib, Swear to me, before witnesses thou wilt give me her to wife, so that with heart at ease I may go forth to find my fortune. Accordingly, Mardas swore this to him, and took the elders of the tribe to witness. Whereupon Gharib fared forth, rejoicing in the attainment of his hopes, and went in to his mother, to whom he related what had passed. O my son, said she, know that Mardas hateth thee, and doth but send thee to this mountain to bereave me of thee. Then take me with thee, and let us depart the tents of this tyrant. But he answered, O my mother, I will not depart hence, till I win my wish and foil my foe. Thereupon he slept till morning arose with its sheen and shone, and hardly had he mounted his charger, when his friends, the young men, came up to him. 200 stalwart knights armed cap a pie, and cried out to him, saying, Take us with thee. We will help thee and company thee by the way. And he rejoiced in them, and cried, Allah requite you for us with good, adding, Come, my friends, let us go. So they set out, and fared on the first day and the second day till evening, when they halted at the foot of a towering mount, and baited their horses. As for Gharib, he left the rest, and walked on into that mountain, till he came to a cave whence issued a light. He entered, and found at the higher facing end of the cave a sheikh, 340 years old, whose eyebrows overhung his eyes, and whose mustachios hid his mouth. Gharib at this sight was filled with awe and veneration, and the hermit said to him, Methinks thou art of the idolaters, O my son, stone-worshipping in the stead of the all-powerful king, the creator of night and day, and of the sphere rolling on her way." When Gharib heard his words, his side muscles quivered, and he said, "O Sheikh, where is this Lord of whom thou speakest, that I may worship him and take my fill of his sight?" Replied the Sheikh, "O my son, this is the Supreme Lord, upon whom none may look in this world. He seeth and is not seen. He is the most high of aspect, and is present everywhere in his works. He it is who maketh all the made, and ordereth time to vade and fade. He is the creator of men and jinn, and sendeth the prophets to guide his creatures into the way of right. Whoso obeyeth him, he bringeth into heaven, and whoso gainsayeth him, he casteth into hell." Asked Gharib, "And how, O uncle, saith whoso worshippeth this puissant Lord, who over all hath power?" "O my son," answered the Sheikh, "I am of the tribe of Ad, which were transgressors in the land, and believed not in Allah. So he sent unto them a prophet, named Hud, but they called him liar, and he destroyed them by means of a deadly wind. But I believed together with some of my tribe, and we were saved from destruction. Moreover, I was present with the tribe of Thamud, and saw what befell them with their prophet Salah. After Salah, the Almighty sent a prophet called Abraham the Friend to Nimrod son of Canaan, and there befell what befell between them. Then my companions died in the saving faith, and I continued in this cave to serve Allah the Most High, who provideth my daily bread without my taking thought." Quoth Gharib, "O uncle, what shall I say that I may become of the troop of this mighty Lord?" "Say," replied the old man, "there is no God but the God, and Abraham is the friend of God." So Abraham embraced the faith of submission with heart and tongue, and the Sheikh said to him, "May the sweetness of belief and devotion be established in thy heart." Then he taught him somewhat the biblical ordinances and scriptures of Al-Islam, and said to him, "What is thy name?" And he replied, "My name is Gharib." Asked the old man, "Whither art thou bound, O Gharib?" So he told him all his history, till he came to the mention of the ghoul of the mountain whom he sought. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 628th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib became a Moslem, and told the Sheikh his past, from first to last, till he came to the mention of the mountain ghoul whom he sought, the old man asked him, 'O Gharib, art thou mad that thou goest forth against the ghoul of the mountain single-handed?' And he answered, 'O my lord, I have with me 200 horse.' 'O Gharib,' rejoined the hermit, 'hast thou 10,000 riders, yet shouldst thou not prevail against him. For his name is the Ghoul, who eateth men, we pray Allah for safety. And he is of the children of Ham. His father's name was Hindi, who peopled Hind, and named it, and he left this son after him, whom he called Sa'adan the Ghoul. Now the same was, O my son, even in his sire's lifetime, a cruel tyrant, and a rebellious devil, and had no other food than flesh of the sons of Adam. His father, when about to die, forbade him from this, but he would not be forbidden, and he redoubled in his forwardness, till Hindi banished him, and drove him forth the land of Hind, after battles and sore travail. Then he came to this country, and fortifying himself herein, established his home in this place, whence he is wont to sally forth, and cut the road of all that come and go, presently returning to the valley he haunteth. Moreover, he hath begotten 5 sons, warlike warlocks, each of whom will do battle with 1,000 braves, and he hath flocked the valley with his booty of treasure and goods, besides horses and camels and cattle and sheep. Wherefore I fear for thee from him. So do thou implore Almighty Allah to further thee against him by the Talil, the formula of unity. And when thou drivest at the infidels, cry, God is most great. For saying, there is no God but the God, confoundeth those who misbelieve. Then the Sheikh gave him a steel mace, 100 pounds in weight, with 10 rings, which clashed like thunder, whenas the wielder brandished it, and a sword forged of a thunderbolt, 3 ells long and 3 spans broad, wherewith, if one smote a rock, the stroke would cleave it in sunder. Moreover, he gave him a hauberk and target and a book, and said to him, Return to thy tribe, and expound unto them al-Islam. So Gharib left him, rejoicing in his new faith, and fared till he found his companions, who met him with salams, saying, What made thee tarry thus? Whereupon he related to them that which had befallen him, and expounded to them al-Islam, and they all Islamized. Early next morning, Gharib mounted and rode to the hermit to farewell him, after which he set out to return to his camp, when, behold, on his way there met him a horseman cap-a-pied, armed so that only his eyes appeared, who made at him, saying, Doff what is on thee, O scum of the Arabs, or I will do thee die. Therewith Gharib drave at him, and there befell between them a battle such as would make a new-born child turn grey, and melt the flinty rock with its sore affray. But presently the Badawi did off his face-veil, and lo, it was Gharib's half-brother Sahim Alail. Now the cause of his coming thither was that when Gharib set out in quest of the mountain ghoul, Sahim was absent, and on his return, not seeing his brother, he went in to his mother, whom he found weeping. He asked the reason of her tears, and she told him what had happened of his brother's journey, whereupon, without allowing himself aught of rest, he donned his war gear, and mounting rode after Gharib till he overtook him, and there befell between them what befell. When, therefore, Sahim discovered his face, Gharib knew him, and saluted him, saying, What moved thee to do this? Quoth Sahim, I had a mind to measure myself with thee in the field, and make trial of my lustihood in cut and thrust. Then they rode together, and on the way Gharib expounded al-Islam to Sahim, who embraced the faith, nor did they cease riding till they were hard upon the valley. Meanwhile the mountain ghoul espied the dust of their horses' feet, and said to his sons, O my sons, mount and fetch me yonder loot. So the five took horse, and made for the party. When Gharib saw the 5 Amalekites approaching, he plied shovel-iron upon his steed's flank, and cried out, saying, Who are ye, and what is your race, and what do ye require? Whereupon Falun bin Sa'adan, the eldest of the 5, came out, and said, Dismount ye, and bind one another, and we will drive you to our father, that he may roast various of you, and boil various, for it is long since he has tasted the flesh of Adam's son. When Gharib heard these words, he drove at Falun, shaking his mace, so that the rings rang like the roaring thunder, and the giant was confounded. Then he smote him a light blow with the mace between the shoulders, and he fell to the ground like a tall-trunked palm tree. Whereupon Sahim and some of his men fell upon him, and pinioned him. Then putting a rope about his neck, they haled him along like a cow. Now when his brothers saw him a prisoner, they charged home upon Gharib, who took 3 of them captive, and the 5th fled back to his sire, who said to him, What is behind thee, and where are the brothers of thee? Quoth he, Verily, a beardless youth, 40 cubits high, hath taken them prisoner. Quoth Sa'adan, May the sun pour no blessing on you. And going down from his hold, tore up a huge tree, with which he went in quest of Gharib and his folk. And he was on foot, for that no horse might carry him, because of the bigness of his body. His son followed him, and the twain went on until they came up with Gharib and his company, when the ghoul fell upon them, without word said, and slew 5 men with his club. Then he made at Sahim, and struck him with his tree, but Sahim avoided the blow, and it fell harmless. Whereat Sa'adan was wroth, and throwing down the weapon, sprang upon Sahim, and caught him in his pounces, as the sparrow-hawk catcheth up the sparrow. Now when Gharib saw his brother in the ghoul's clutches, he cried out, saying, Allahu Akbar, God is most great. O the favor of Abraham the friend, the Muhammad, the blessed one, whom Allah may keep and assain. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of section 33. Recording by Bill Borst.
Section 34 of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Siddharth. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6, by Anonymous. Translated by Richard Francis Burton. Section 34. When it was the 629th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib saw his brother in the clutches of the Ghul, he cried out, saying, O, the favour of Ibrahim, the friend, the blessed one, whom Allah keep and assain, and crave his charger at Sa'adan, shaking his mace till the rings loud rang. Then he cried out again, God is most great, and smote the Ghul on the flat of the ribs with his mace, whereupon he fell to the ground insensible, and loosed his grip on Sahim, nor did he come to himself ere he was pinioned and shackled. When his son saw this, he turned and fled, but Gharib drove steed after him, and smiting him with his mace between the shoulders, threw him from his horse. So they bound him with his father and brethren, and haltering them with ropes, haled them all six along like baggage camels, till they reached the Ghul's castle, which they found full of goods and treasures and things of price. And there they also came upon 1,200 Ajamis, men of Persia, bound and shackled. Gharib sat down on Sa'adan's chair, which had aforetime belonged to Shasa bin Shais bin Shaddad bin Ad, causing Sahim to stand on his right and his companions on his either hand, and sending for the Ghul of the mountain, said to him, How findest thou thyself, O accursed? Replied Sa'adan, O my lord, in the sorriest of plights of abasement and mortification, my sons and I, we are bound with ropes like camels. Quoth Gharib, It is my will you enter my faith, the faith al-Islam, highs and acknowledge the unity of all knowledge of the all-knowing King, whose all might created light and night and everything. There is no God but He, the requiting King, and confess the mission and prophethood of Abraham the friend, on whom be peace. So the Ghul and his sons made the required profession after the goodliest fashion, and Gharib bade loose their bonds, whereupon Sa'adan wept and would have kissed his feet, he and his sons, but Gharib forbade them, and they stood with the rest who stood before him. Then said Gharib, Harkiye Sa'adan, and he replied, At thy service, O my lord. Quoth Gharib, What are these captives? O my lord, quoth the Ghul, These are my game from the land of the Persians, and are not the only ones. Asked Gharib, And who is with them? And Sa'adan answered, O my lord, there is with them the princess Fakhr Taj, daughter of King Sabur of Persia, and 100 damsels like moons. When Gharib heard this, he marvelled and said, O Emir, how came ye by these? Replied Sa'adan, I went forth one night with my sons and 5 of my slaves in quest of booty, but finding no spoil in our way, we dispersed over wilds and birds and fared on, hoping we might happen on somewhat of prey and not return empty-handed, till we found ourselves in the land of Persians. Presently we espied a dust cloud, and sent on to reconnoitre one of our slaves, who was absent a while, and presently returned and said, O my lord, this is the Princess Fakhr Taj, daughter of Sabur, king of Persians, Turkomans and Medes, and she is on a journey, attended by 2,000 horse. Quoth I, Thou hast gladdened us with good news. We could have no finer loot than this. Then I and my sons fell upon the Persians, and slew of them 300 men, and took the princess and 1,200 cavaliers prisoners, together with all that was with her of treasure and riches, and brought them to this our castle. Quoth Gharib, Hast thou offered any violence to the Princess Fakartaj? Quoth Sadan, Not I, as thy head liveth, and by the virtue of the faith I have but now embraced. Gharib replied, It was well done of thee, O Sa'adan, for her father is the king of the world, and doubtless he will dispatch troops in quest of her and lay waste the dwellings of those who took her. And whoso looketh not to issue an end hath not fate to friend. But where is the damsel? Said Sa'adan. I have set apart a pavilion for her and her damsels. Said Gharib, Show me her lodging. Whereto Sa'adan rejoined, Hearkening and obedience. So he carried him to the pavilion, and there he found the princess, mournful and cast down, weeping for her former condition of dignity and delight. When Gharib saw her, he thought the moon was near him, and magnified Allah, and all-hearing, the all-seeing. The princess also looked at him and saw him a princely cavalier, with valour shining from between his eyes, and testifying for him, and not against him. So she rose and kissed his hands, then fell at his feet, saying, O hero of the age, I am under thy protection. Guard me from this ghoul, for I fear lest he do away with my maidenhead, and after devour me.
So take me to serve thine handmaidens.
Quoth Gharib, Thou art safe, and thou shalt be restored to thy father and the seat of thy worship. Whereupon she prayed that he might live long and have advancement in rank and honour. Then he bade unbind the Persians, and turning to the princess, said to her, What brought thee forth of thy palace to the wilds and wastes, so that the highway robbers made prize of thee? She replied, O my lord, my father and all the people of his realm, Turks and Daylamites, are Magians, worshipping fire, and not the all-powerful king. Now in our country is a monastery called the Monastery of the Fire, whither every year the daughters of the Magians and worshippers of the fire resort at the time of their festivals, and abide there a month, after which they return to their houses. So I and my damsels set out, as wont, attended by 2,000 horse, whom my father sent with me to guard me. But by the way, this ghoul came out against us, and slew some of us, taking the rest captive, imprisoned us in this hold. This, then, is what befell me, O valiant champion, whom Allah guard against the shifts of time. And Gharib said, Fear not, for I will bring thee to thy palace, and the seat of thy honours. Wherefore she blessed him, and kissed his hands and feet. Then he went out from her, after having commanded to treat her with respect, and slept till morning. Then he made the wuzu ablution, and prayed a 2-bow prayer, after the rite of our father Abraham, the friend, on whom be peace, whilst the ghoul and his sons, in Gharib's company, all did the like after him. Then he turned to the ghoul, and said to him, O Sa'adan, wilt thou not show me the Valley of Blossoms? I will, O my lord, said he. So Gharib and his company and the princess Fakartaj and her maidens all rose and went forth, while Sa'adan commanded his slaves and slave girls to slaughter and cook and make ready the morning meal, and bring it to them among the trees. For the giant had 150 handmaids and 1,000 chattels to pasture his camels and oxen and sheep. When they came to the valley, they found it beautiful exceedingly and passing all degree, and the birds on the tree sang joyously, and the mocking nightingale thrilled out her melody, and the cushat filled her moan, the mansions made by the deity. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 630th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib and his merry men and the giant and his tribe reached the Valley of Blossoms, they found birds flying free, the cushat filling with her moan the mansions made by the deity, the bulbul singing as if it were human harmony, and the mule whom to describe tongue faileth utterly, the turtle whose playing maddens men for love ecstasy, and the ringdove, and the popinjay answering her with fluency. There also were trees laden with all manner of fruitary, of each two kinds, the pomegranate, sweet and sour upon branches, growing luxuriantly, the almond apricot, the camphor apricot, and the almond Khorasan hice, the plum, with whose branches the boughs of the myrobalan were entwined tight, the orange, as it were, a crescent flaming tight, the shaddock weighed down with heavy fright, the lemon that cures lack of appetite, the crichton against jaundice of sovereign might, and the date, red and yellow bright, the especial handiwork of Allah the Most High. Of the like of this place, saith the enamored poet, when its birds in the lake make melody, the lone lover yearneth its sight to see. 'Tis as Eden breathing a fragrant breeze, with its shade and fruits and rills flowing free. Gharib marvelled at the beauty of that valley, and bade them set up there the pavilion of Fakhar-Taj, the Khosrite. So they pitched it among the trees and spread it with richer tapestries. Then he sat down, and the slaves brought food, and they ate sufficiently. After which quoth Gharib, Harkiye Sa'adan, and quoth he, at thy service, O my lord. Hast thou aught of wine? asked Gharib, and Sa'adan answered, Yes, I have a cistern full of old wine. Said Gharib, Bring us some of it. So Sa'adan sent 10 slaves who returned with great plenty of wine, and they ate and drank, and were mirthful and merry. And Gharib bethought him of Mahdiya, and improvised these couplets. I mind our union days when ye were nigh, and flames my heart with love's consuming love. By Allah, ne'er of will I quitted you, but shifts of time from you compelled me go. Peace and fair luck, and greetings thousandfold to you from exiled lovers finding woe. They both eating and drinking and taking their pleasure in the valley for 3 days, after which they returned to the castle. Then Gharib called Sahim and said to him, Take 100 horse, and go to thy father and mother and thy tribe, the Banu Kahtan, and bring them all to this place, here to pass the rest of their days, whilst I carry the princess of Persia back to her father. As for thee, O Sa'adan, tarry thou here with thy sons, till I return to thee. Asked Sa'adan, And why wilt thou not carry me with thee to the land of the Persians? And Gharib answered, Because thou stolest away King Sabu's daughter, and if his eye fall on thee, he will eat thy flesh and drink thy blood. When the Gul heard this, he laughed a loud laugh, as it were the pealing thunder, and said, O my lord, by the life of thy head, if the Persians and Medes united against me, I would make them quaff the cup of annihilation. Quoth Gharib, 'Tis as thou sayest, but tarry thou here in fort till I return to thee.
And quoth the Gul,
I hear and I obey. Then Sahim departed with his comrades of the Banu Kahtan for the dwelling places of their tribe, and Gharib set out with Princess Fakhar-Taj and her company, intending for the cities of Sabur, king of the Persians. Thus far concerning them, but as regards King Sabur, he abode, awaiting his daughter's return from the monastery of the fire. And when the appointed time passed by, and she came not, flames raged in his heart. whereof the oldest, wisest, and chiefest was highest Didon. And so he said to him, O minister, verily my daughter delayeth her return, and I have no news of her, though the appointed times is past. So do thou send a courier to the monastery of fire, to learn what is come of her. Hearkening and obedience, replied Didon, and summoning the chief of the couriers, said to him,
Went thou forthright to the monastery.
So he lost no time, and when he reached it, he asked the monks of the king's daughter, but they said, We have not seen her this year. So the courier returned to the city of Isbanir, and told the wazir, who went in to the king and acquainted him with the message. Now when Sabur heard this, he cast his crown on the ground, tore his beard, and fell down in a trance. They sprinkled water upon him, and presently he came to himself, tearful-eyed and heavy-hearted, and repeated the words of the poet. When I far parted, patience call, and tears came to call, but patience never hears. What then if fortune parted us so far? Fortune and perfidy are peers. Then he called 10 of his captains and bade them mount with 8,000 horse and ride in different directions in quest of his daughter. So they mounted forthright and departed each with his 1,000, whilst Fakartaj's mother clad herself and her women in black, and strewed ashes on her head, and sat weeping and lamenting. Such was their case, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 631st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that King Sabur sent his troops in quest of his daughter, whose mother clad herself and her women in black. Such was their case. But as regards the strange adventures of Gharib and the princess, they journeyed on 10 days, and on the 11th day appeared a dust cloud which rose to the confines of the sky, whereupon Gharib called the emir of the Persians and said to him, Go learn the cause thereof. I hear and obey, replied he, and crave his charger, till he came under the cloud of dust, where he saw folk and inquired of them. Quoth one of them, We are of the Banu Hattal, and are questing for plunder. Our emir is Samson bin al-Jirah, and we are 5,000 horse. The Persians returned in haste and told their saying to Gharib, who cried out to his men of the Banu Khatan and to the Persians, saying, Don your arms. They did as he bade them, and presently up came the Arabs, who were shouting, A plunder, a plunder. Quoth Gharib, Allah confound you, O dogs of Arabs. Then he loosened his horse and drove at them with the career of a right valiant knight, shouting, Allahu Akbar, ho, for the faith of Abraham, the friend, on whom be peace. And there befell between them great fight and sword fray, and the sword went round in a sway, and there was much said and say, nor did they leave fighting till fled the day, and gloom came when they drew from one another way. Then Gharib numbered his tribesmen, and found that 5 of the Banu Khatan had fallen, and 73 of the Persians, but of the Banu Hattal they had slain more than 500 horse. As for Samson, he alighted, and sought nor meat nor sleep, but said, In all my life I never saw such a fighter as this youth.
Anon he fighteth
with the sword,
and anon with the mace.
But tomorrow I will go forth on champion wise and defy him to combat, of twain in the battle plain, where edge and point are fain, and I will cut off these Arabs. Now when Gharib returned to his camp, the Princess Fakartaj met him, weeping and affrighted for the fear of that which had befallen, and kissed his foot in the stirrup, saying, May thy hands never wither, nor thy foes be blitter, O champion of the age. Alhamdulillah, praise to God. who hath saved thee alive this day. Verily, I am in fear for thee from yonder Arabs. When Gharib heard this, he smiled in her face, and heartened and comforted her, saying, Fear not, O princess. Did the enemy fill this wild and bold, yet I would scatter them by the might of Allah Almighty. She thanked him and prayed that he might be given the victory over his foes, after which she returned to her woman, and Gharib went to his tent, where he cleansed himself of the blood of the infidels, and they lay on guard through the night. Next morning the two hosts mounted and sought the plain, where cut and thrust ruled sovereign. The first to pick into the open was Gharib, who drave his charger till he was near the infidels, and cried out, Who is for jousting with me? Let no sluggard or weakling come out to me. Whereupon there rushed forth a giant Amalekite of the lineage of the tribe of Ad, armed with an iron flail 20 pounds in weight, and drove at Gharib, saying, O scum of the Arabs, take what cometh to thee, and learn the glad tidings that thy last hour is at hand. So saying, he aimed a blow at Gharib, but he avoided it, and the flail sank a cubit into the ground. Now the Badawi was bent double with the blow. So Gharib smote him with his mace and clove his forehead in sunder, and he fell down dead, and Allah hurried his soul to hellfire. Then Gharib charged and wheeled and called for champions. So there came out to him a second and third, and a fourth, and so on, till 10 had come forth to him, and he slew them all. When the infidels saw his form of fight and his smashing blows, they hung back and forbore to fare forth to him. Whereupon Samson looked at them and said, Allah never bless you, I will go forth to him. So he donned his battle gear, and driving his charger into midfield, where he fronted the foe, and cried out to Gharib, saying, Fie on thee, O dog of the Arabs! Hath thy strength waxed so great that thou shouldst defy me in the open field and slaughter my men? And Gharib replied, Up and take blood revenge for the slaughter of thy braves. So Samson ran at Gharib, who awaited him with broadened breast and heartened, and they smote each other with maces, till the two hosts marvelled, and every eye was fixed on them. Then they wheeled about in the field, and struck at each other 2 strokes, but Gharib avoided Samson's stroke, which we had broke, and dealt with a buffet that beat in his breastbone, and cast him to the ground, stone dead. Whereupon all his host ran at Gharib as one man, and he ran at them, crying, God is most great, help and victory for us, and shame and defeat for those who misbelieve the faith of Abraham, the friend, on whom be peace. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. End of section 34.
Section 35 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Omondutre. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6, by Anonymous. Translated by Richard Francis Burton. Section 35. When it was the 632nd night, she said, It had reached me, O auspicious king, that when Samson's tribesmen rushed upon Gharib as one man, he ran at them, crying, God is most great, help and victory for us, and shame and defeat for the miscreant. Now, when the infidels heard the name of the all-powerful king, the one, the all-conquering, whom the sight comprehended not, but he comprehended the sight, they looked at one another and said, What is this say that maketh our side muscles tremble, and weakens our resolution, and causeth the life to fail in us? Never in our lives heard we aught goodlier than this saying, adding, Let us leave fighting, that we may ask its meaning. So they held their hands from the battle, and dismounted, and their elders assembled and held counsel together, seeking to go to Gharib and saying, Let 10 of us repair to him. So they chose out 10 of their best, who set out for Gharib's tents. Now he and his people had alighted and returned to their camp, marveling at the withdrawal of the infidels from the fight. But presently, lo and behold, the 10 came up, and seeking speech of Gharib, kissed the earth before him, and wished him glory and lasting life. Quoth he to them, What made you leave fighting? And quoth they, O my lord, thou didst affright us with the words thou shoutest out at us. Then asked Gharib, What calamity do ye worship? And they answered, We worship Wad and Suwa and Yaguz, lords of the tribe of Noah. And Gharib, We serve none but Allah Almighty, maker of all things and provider of all livings. He it is who created the heavens and the earth, and established the mountains, who made water to well from the stones, and the trees to grow and feed it wild beasts in wood. For he is Allah, the one, the all-powerful Lord. When they heard this, their bosoms broadened to the words of unity faith, and they said, Verily, this be a Lord high and great, compassionating and compassionate. Adding, And what shall we say to become of the Muslims, of those which submit themselves to him? Quoth Gharib, Say, There is no God but the God, and Abraham is the friend of God. So the 10 made veracious profession of the veritable religion, and Gharib said to them, And the sweet savour of Al-Islam be indeed established in your hearts. Fare ye to your tribe and expound the faith to them. And if they profess, they shall be saved. But if they refuse, we will burn them with fire. So the 10 elders returned and expounded Al-Islam to their people, and set forth to them the path of truth and creed. And they embraced the faith of submission with heart and tongue. Then they repaired on foot to Gharib's tent, and kissing ground between his hands, wished him honor and high rank, saying, O our Lord, we are become thy slaves, so command us with what thou wilt, for we are to thee obedient and obedient, and we will never depart from thee, since Allah hath guided us into the right way at thy hands. Replied he, Allah abundantly requite you. Return to your dwellings and march forth with your good and your children, and forego me to the Wadi of Blossoms and the castle of Sasa bin Shays, whilst I carry the Princess Fakhrtaz, daughter of Sabur, king of the Persians, back to her father, and return to you. Hearkening and obedience, said they, and straightforward returned to the encampment, rejoicing in Al-Islam, and expounded the true faith to their wives and children, who became believers. Then they struck their tents and set forth with their good and cattle for the Wadi of Blossoms. When they came in sight of the castle of Shays, Sadan and his sons sallied forth to them. But Gharib had charged them, saying, If the girl of the mountain come out to you, and offer to attack you, do ye call upon the name of Allah, the All-Creator, and He will leave His hostile intent and receive you hospitably. So, when he would have fallen upon them, they called aloud upon the name of Almighty Allah, and straightway He received them kindly and asked them of their case. They told him all that had passed between Gharib and themselves, whereupon he rejoiced in them and lodged them with him and loaded them with favours. Such was their case. But as regards Gharib, he and his, escorting the princess, fared on 5 days' journey towards the city of Isbanir. And on the 6th day they saw a dust cloud. So Gharib sent one of the Persians to learn the meaning of this, and he went and returned, swiftlier than bird in flight, saying, O my lord, these be 1,000 horse of our comrades, whom the king had sent in quest of his daughter, Fakhr-Taj. When Gharib heard this, he commanded his company to halt and pitch the tents. So they halted and waited till the newcomers reached them. When they went to meet them and told Taman, their captain, that the princess was with them, whereupon he went into Gharib, and kissing the ground before him, inquired for her. Gharib sent him to her pavilion, and he entered and kissed her hands and feet, and acquainted her with what had befallen her father and mother. She told him in return all that had betided her, and how Gharib had delivered her from the girl of the mountain. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 633rd night, she said, It had reached me, O auspicious king, that when the king's daughter, Fakhr-Taj, had told Taman all that had befallen her from the mountain girl, and how he had imprisoned her, and would have devoured her but for Gharib, adding, And indeed it behoved my sire to give him the half of his reign. Taman arose, and returned to Gharib, and kissed his hands and feet, and thanked him for his good dealing, saying, With thy leave, O my lord, I'll return to Isbanir, and deliver our king the good news of his daughter's approach. Go, replied Gharib, and take of him the gift of glad tidings. So Taman returned with all diligence to Isbanir, the cities, and entering the palace, kissed ground before the king, who said to him, What is there of new, O bringer of good news? Quoth Taman, I will not speak thee, till thou give me the gift of glad tidings. Quoth the king, Tell me thy glad tidings, and I will content thee. So Taman said, O king, I bring thee joyful intelligence of the return of Princess Fakhr-Taj. When Sabur heard his daughter's name, he fell down fainting, and they sprinkled rosewater on him, till he recovered, and cried to Taman, Draw near to me and tell me all the good which had befallen her. So he came forward, and acquainted him with all that had betided the princess. And Sabur laid hand upon hand, saying, Unhappy thou, O Fakhr-Taj. And he bade give Taman 10,000 gold pieces, and conferred on him the government of Isfahan city and its dependencies. Then he cried out to his amirs, saying, Mount all of you, and fare we forth to meet the Princess Fakhr-Taj. And the chief eunuch went into the queen mother, and told her and all the harem the good news, whereat she rejoiced and gave him a robe of honor and 1,000 dinars. Moreover, the people of the city heard of this, and decorated the market streets and houses. Then the king and Taman took horse, and rode till they had sight of Gharib, when Sabur footed it, and made some steps towards Gharib, who also dismounted and advanced to meet him, and they embraced and saluted each other. And Sabur bent over Gharib's hand and kissed it, and thanked him for his favors. They pitched their pavilions in face of each other, and Sabur went into his daughter, who rose, and embracing him, told him all that had befallen her, and how Gharib had rescued her from the clutches of the girl of the mountain. Quoth the king, By thy life, O princess of fair ones, I will overwhelm him with gifts. And, quoth she, O my papa, make him thy son-in-law, that he may be to thee a force against thy foes, for he is passing valiant. Her father replied, O my daughter, knowest thou not that King Kirat Shah seeketh thee in marriage, and that he had cast a brocade, and had given 100,000 dinars in settlement, and he is king of Shiraz and its dependencies, and is lord of empire and horsemen and footmen. But when the princess heard these words, she said, O my papa, I desire not that whereof thou speakest, and if thou constrain me to that I have no mind to, I will slay myself. So Sabur left her and went into Gharib, who rose to him, and they sat a while together. But the king could not take his fill of looking upon him, and he said in his mind, By Allah, my daughter is excusable if she loved this Badawi. Then he called for food, and they ate and passed the night together. On the morrow they took horse and rode till they arrived at the city of Isbanir, and entered stirrup to stirrup, and it was for them a great day. Fakhr Taj repaired to her palace, and the abiding place of her rank, where her mother and her women received her with cries of joy and loud lullyloings. As for King Sabur, he sat down on his throne, and seated Gharib on his right hand, whilst the princes and chamberlains, the amirs, wazirs, and nababs stood on either hand, and gave him joy of the recovery of his daughter. Said Sabur, Whoso loveth me, let him bestow a robe of honor on Gharib. And there fell dresses of honor on him like drops of rain. Then Gharib abode the king's guest 10 days. When he would have departed, but Sabur clad him in an honorable robe, and swore him by his faith that he should not march for a whole month. Quoth Gharib, O king, I am plighted to one of the girls of the Arabs, and I desire to go into her. Quoth the king, Whether is the fairer, thy betrothed or Fakhr Taj? O king of the age, replied Gharib, what is the slave beside the lord? And Sabur said, Fakhr Taj is become thy handmaid, for that thou didst rescue her from the paunches of the girl, and she shall have none other husband than thyself. Thereupon Gharib rose and kissed ground, saying, O king of the age, thou art a sovereign, and I am but a poor man, and belike thou wilt ask a heavy dowry. Replied the king, O my son, know that Kirat Shah, lord of Shiraz and dependencies thereof, seeketh her in marriage, and hath appointed 100,000 dinars to her dower. But I have chosen thee before all men, that I may make thee the sword of my kingship, and my shield against vengeance. Then he turned to his chief officers and said to them, Bear witness against me, O lords of mine empire, that I marry my daughter Fakhr Taj to my son Gharib. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 634th night, she continued, It had reached me, O auspicious king, that Sabur, king of Ajam land, said to his chief officers, Bear a witness against me that I marry my daughter Fakhr Taj to my son Gharib. With that he joined palms with him, and she became his wife. Then said Gharib, Appoint me a dower, and I will bring it to thee, for I have in the castle of Sasa wealth and treasures beyond count. Replied Sabur, O my son, I want of thee neither treasure nor wealth, and I will take nothing for her dower, save the hate of Jamar Khan, king of dust, and the city of Avaj. Quoth Gharib, O king of the age, I will fetch my folk forthright, and go to thy foe and spoil his realm. Quoth Sabur, Allah require thee with good, and dismissed the lords and commons, thinking, If Gharib go forth against Jamar Khan, he will never more return. When morning morrowed, the king mounted with Gharib, and bidding all his troops take horse rode forth to the plain, where he said to his men, do ye tilt its spears and gladden my heart. So the champions of Persia land played one against other, and Gharib said, O king of the age, I have a mind to tilt with the horsemen of Ajam land, but on one condition. Asked the king, What is that? And answered Gharib, It is that I shall don a light tunic and take a headless lance, with a pennon dipped in saffron, whilst the Persian champions sally fought and tilt against me with sharp spears. If any conquer me, I will render myself to him. But if I conquer him, I will mark him on the breast, and he shall leave the plain. Then the king cried to the commander of the troops to bring forward the champions of the Persians. So he chose out from amongst the princes 1,200 of his stoutest champions. And the king said to them, in the Persian tongue, Whoso slaveth this Badawi may ask of me what he will. So they strove with one another for precedence, and charged down upon Gharib, and truth was distinguished from falsehood, and jest from honest. Quoth Gharib, I put my trust in Allah, the God of Abraham, the friend, the deity, who has power over all, and from whom naught is hidden, the One, the Almighty, whom the sight comprehendeth not. Then an Amalekite-like giant of the Persian champions rushed out to him. But Gharib let him not stand long before him, ere he marked him and covered his breast with saffron. And as he turned away, he smote him on the nape of the shaft of his lance, and he fell to the ground, and his pages bore him from the lists. Then a second champion came forth against him, and he overcame him, and marked him on the breast. And thus did he with the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. And there came out against him champion after champion, till he had overcome them all, and marked them on the breast. For Almighty Allah gave him the victory over them, and they fared forth vanquished from the plain. Then the servants set food and strong wine before them, and they ate and drank, till Gharib's wits were dazed by the drink. By and by he went out to obey a call of nature, and would have returned, but lost his way and entered the palace of Fakhr-Taj. When she saw him, her reason fled, and she cried out to her women, saying, Go forth from me to your own places. So they withdrew, and she rose and kissed Gharib's hand, saying, Welcome to my lord, who delivered me from the girl. Indeed, I am thine handmaid for ever and ever. Then she drew him to her bed and embraced him, whereupon desire was hot upon him, and he broke her seal, and lay with her till the morning. Meanwhile the king thought that he had departed, but on the morrow he went into him, and Sabur rose to him, and made him sit by his side. Then entered the tributary kings, and kissing the ground, stood ranged in rows on the right and left, and fell to talking of Gharib's valour, and saying, Extolled be he who gave him such prowess, albeit he is so young in years. As they were thus engaged, behold, all espied from the palace windows the dust of horse approaching, and the king cried out to his scouts, saying, Woe to you! Go and bring me news of yonder dust. So a cavalier took horse and riding off, returned after a while, and said, O king, we found under that dust 100 horse belonging to an Amir, highs Sahim al-Lail. Gharib, hearing these words, cried out, O my lord, this is my brother, whom I had sent on an errand, and I will go forth to meet him. So saying, he mounted, with his 100 men of the Banu Qatan, and 1,000 Persians, and rode to meet his brother in great state. But greatness belongeth to God alone. When the two came up with each other, they dismounted and embraced, and Gharib said to Sahim, O my brother, hast thou brought our tribe to the castle of Sasa, and the Wadi of Blossoms? O my brother, replied Sahim. When the perfidious dog Mardas heard that thou hadst made thee master of the stronghold belonging to the mountain girl, he was sore chagrined and said, Accept thy march hence. Gharib will come and carry off my daughter Mahdiya without dower. So he took his daughter and his goods and set out with his tribe for the land of Iraq, where he entered the city of Kufa and put himself under the protection of King Azib, seeking to give him his daughter to wife. When Gharib heard his brother's story, he well nigh gave up the ghost for rage, and said, By the virtue of the faith of Al-Islam, the faith of Abraham the friend, and by the Supreme Lord, I will assuredly go to the land of Iraq, and fierce war upon it I will set on foot. Then they returned to the city, and going into the king, kissed ground before him. He rose to Gharib and saluted Sahim, after which the elder brother told him what had happened, and he put 10 captains at his commandment, under each one's hand 10,000 horse of the duftiest of the Arabs and the Ajams, who equipped themselves and were ready to depart in 3 days. Then Gharib set out and journeyed till he reached the castle of Sasa, whence the girl and his sons came forth to meet him, and dismounting, kissed his feet in the stirrups. He told them all that had passed, and the giants said, O my lord, do thou abide in this thy castle, whilst I with my sons and servants repair to Iraq, and lay waste the city Al-Rustaq, and bring to thy hand all its defenders bound in straitest bond. But Gharib thanked him and said, O Sadan, we will all go. So he made him ready, and the whole body set out for Iraq, leaving 1,000 horse to guard the castle. Thus far concerning them, but as regards Mardas, he arrived with his tribe in the land of Iraq, bringing with him a handsome present, and fared for Kufa city, which he entered. Then he presented himself before Ajib, and kissed the ground between his hands, and, after washing what is wished to kings, said, O my lord, I come to place myself under thy protection. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of Section 35.
Section 36 of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6, by Anonymous. Translated by Richard Francis Burton. Section 36. When it was the 635th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Mardas coming into the presence of Ajib said to him, I come to place myself under thy protection. Quoth Ajib, Tell me who hath wronged thee, that I may protect thee against him, though it were Sabur, king of the Persians and the Turkomans and the Dalamites. Quoth Mardas, O king of the age, he who hath wronged me is none other than a youth whom I reared in my bosom. I found him in his mother's lap in a certain valley, and took her to wife. She brought me a son, whom I named Sahim Alail, and her own son, Gharib Haiz, grew up on my knees, and became a blasting thunderbolt and a lasting calamity. For he smote Al-Hamal, prince of the Banu Nabhan, and slew footmen and threw horsemen. Now I have a daughter who befitteth thee alone, and he sought her of me, so I required of him the head of the ghoul of the mountain. Wherefore he went to him, and, after engaging him in singular combat, made the master his man, and took the castle of Sasa bin Shays bin Shaddad bin Ad, wherein are the treasures of the ancients and the hoards of the moderns. Moreover, I hear that, become a Moslem, he goeth about summoning the folk to his faith. He is gone now to bear the princess of Persia, whom he delivered from the ghoul, back to her father, King Sabur, and will not return but with the treasures of the Persians. When Ajib heard the story of Mardas, he changed color to yellow, and was in ill case, and made sure of his own destruction.
Then he said, O Mardus, is the youth's mother with thee or with him? And Mardus replied, She is with me in my tents. Quoth Ajib, What is her name? Quoth Mardus, Her name is Nusra. 'Tis very she, rejoined Ajib, and sent for her to the presence. Now when she came before him, he looked on her and knew her, and asked her, O accursed, where are the 2 slaves I sent with thee? And she answered, They slew each other on my account. Whereupon Ajib bared his blade and smote her and cut her in twain. Then they dragged her away and cast her out. But trouble and suspicion entered Ajib's heart, and he cried, O Mardus, give me thy daughter to wife. He rejoined, She is one of thine handmaids. I give her to thee to wife, and I am thy slave. Said Ajib, I desire to look upon this son of an adulteress, Gharib, that I may destroy him and cause him taste all manner of torments. Then he bade give Mardus to his daughter's dowry 30,000 dinars and 100 pieces of silk brocaded and fringed with gold and 100 pieces of silk-bordered stuffs and kerchiefs and golden collars. So he went forth with this mighty fine dowry, and set himself to equip Media in all diligence. Such was their case. But as regards Gharib, he fared on till he came to Al-Jazira, which is the first town in Al-Iraq, and is a walled and fortified city, and he hard by it called a halt. When the townsfolk saw his army encamped before it, they bolted the gates and manned the walls, then went to the king of the city, who was called Al-Damigh, the brainer, for that he used to brain the champions in the open field of fight, and told him what was come upon them. So he looked forth from the battlements of the palace, and seeing a conquering host, all of them Persians, encamped before the city, said to the citizens, O folk, what do yonder Ajams want? And they replied, We know not. Now Al-Damigh had among his officers a man called Saba al-Kifar, the desert lion, keen of wit and penetrating as he were a flame of fire. So he called him and said to him, Go to this stranger host, and find out who they be and what they want, and return quickly. Accordingly he sped like the wind to the Persian tents, where a company of Arabs rose up and met him, saying, Who art thou, and what dost thou require? He replied, I am a messenger and an envoy from the lord of the city to your chief. So they took him and carried him through the lines of tents, pavilions, and standards, till they came to Gharib's Shamiana, and told him of the mission. He bade them bring him in, and they did so. Whereupon he kissed ground before Gharib, and wished him honor and length of days. Quoth Gharib, What is thine errand? And quoth Saba al-Kifar, I am an envoy from the lord of the city of Al-Jazira, Al-Damigh, brother of King Kundamir, lord of the city of Kufa in the land of Iraq. When Gharib heard his father's name, the tears railed from his eyes in rills, and he looked at the messenger and said, What is thy name? And he replied, My name is Saba al-Kifar. Said Gharib, Return to thy lord and tell him that the commander of this host is called Gharib, son of Kundamir, king of Kufa, whom his son Ajib slew, and he is come to take blood, revenge for his sire on Ajib the perfidious hound. So Saba al-Kifar returned to the city, and in great joy kissed the ground, when Al-Damigh said, What is going on there, O Saba al-Kifar? He replied, O my master, the leader of yon host is thy nephew, thy brother's son, and told him all. The king deemed himself in a dream, and asked the messenger, O Saba al-Kifar, is this thou tellest me true? And the desert lion answered, As thy head liveth, it is sooth. Then Al-Damigh bade his chief officers take horse forthright, and all rode out to the camp, whence Gharib came forth and met him, and they embraced and saluted each other. After which Gharib carried him to his tents, and they sat down on beds of estate. Al-Damigh rejoiced in Gharib, his brother's son, and presently turning to him said, I have also yearned to take blood revenge for thy father, but could not avail against the dog thy brother, for that his troops are many, and my troops are few. Replied Gharib, O uncle, here am I come to avenge my sire and blot out our shame and rid the realm of Ajib. Said Al-Damigh, O son of my brother, thou hast 2 blood wreaks to take, that of thy father and that of thy mother. Asked Gharib, And what aileth my mother? And Al-Damigh answered, Thy brother Ajib has slain her. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 636th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib heard these words of his uncle Al-Damigh, Verily thy brother Ajib hath slain her. He asked what was the cause thereof, and was told of all that had happened, especially how Mardus had married his daughter to Ajib, who was about to go into her. Thereupon Gharib's reason fled from his head, and he swooned away and was nigh upon death. No sooner did he come to himself than he cried out to the troops, saying, "To horse!" But Aldamig said to him, "O son of my brother, wait till I make ready mine affairs, and mount among my men, and fare with thee at thy stirrup." Replied Gharib, "I have no patience to wait. Do thou equip thy troops, and join me at Kufa." Thereupon Gharib mounted with his troops, and rode till he came to the town of Babel, whose folks took fright at him. Now there was in this town a king called Jamak, under whose hand were 20,000 horsemen, and there gathered themselves together to him from the villages other 50,000 horse, who pitched their tents facing the city. Then Gharib wrote a letter and sent it to King Jamak by messenger, who came up to the city gate and cried out, saying, "I am an envoy." Whereupon the warder of the gate went in and told Jamak, who said, "Bring him to me." So he led in the messenger, who, kissing the ground before the king, gave him the letter, and Jamak opened it and read its contents as follows: "Praise be to Allah, Lord of the three worlds, Lord of all things, who giveth to all creatures their daily bread, and who over all things is omnipotent. These from Gharib, son of King Kundamir, Lord of Iraq and Kufa, to Jamak. Immediately this letter reacheth thee. Let not thy reply be other than to break thine idols and confess the unity of the all-knowing King, Creator of light and darkness, Creator of all things, the all-powerful, and except thou do as I bid thee, I will make this day the blackest of thy days. Peace be on those who follow in the way of salvation, fearing the issues of fornication, and obey the hest of the Most High King, Lord of this world and the next, him who saith to a thing, Be, and it becometh." Now when Jamak read this letter, his eyes paled and his color failed, and he cried out to the messenger, "Go to thy lord and say to him, Tomorrow at daybreak there shall be fight and conflict, and it shall appear who is the conquering hero." So he returned and told Gharib, who bade his men make ready for battle, whilst Jamak commanded his tents to be pitched in face of Gharib's camp, and his troops poured forth like the surging sea, and passed the night with intention of slaughter. As soon as dawned the day, the two hosts mounted and drew up in battle array, and beat their drums amain, and drave their steeds of swiftest strain. And they filled the whole earthly plain, and the champions to come out were fain. Now the first who sallied forth a championing to the field was the ghoul of the mountain, bearing on shoulder a terrible tree. And he cried out between the two hosts, saying, "I am Sadan the ghoul. Who is for fighting? Who is for jousting? Let no sluggard come forth to me, nor weakling." And he called out to his sons, saying, "Woe to you! Bring me fuel and fire, for I am an hungered." So they cried upon their slaves, who brought firewood and kindled a fire in the heart of the plain. Then there came out to him a man of the Kafirs, an Amalekite of the unbelieving Amalekites, bearing on his shoulder a mace like the mast of a ship, and drove at Sadan the ghoul, saying, "Woe to thee, O Sadan!" When the giant heard this, he waxed furious beyond measure, and raising his tree club, aimed at the infidel a blow that hummed through the air. The Amalekite met the stroke with his mace, but the tree beat down his guard, and descending with its own weight, together with the weight of the mace upon his head, beat in his brain pan, and he fell like a long-stemmed palm tree. Thereupon Sadan cried to his slaves, saying, "Take this fatted calf, and roast him quickly." So they hastened to skin the infidel, and roasted him and brought him to the ghoul, who ate his flesh and crunched his bones. Now when the Kafirs saw how Sadan did with their fellow, their hair and piles stood on end, their skins quaked, their color changed, their hearts died within them, and they said to one another, "Whoso goeth out against this ghoul, he eateth him, and cracketh his bones, and causeth him to lack the zephyr wind of the world." Wherefore they held their hands, quailing for fear of the ghoul and his sons, and turned to fly, making for the town. But Gharib cried out to his troops, saying, "Up and after the runaways!" So the Persians and the Arabs crave after the king of Babel and his host, and caused sword to smite them, till they slew of them 20,000 or more. Then the fugitives crowded together in the city gate, and they killed of them much people, and they could not avail to shut the gate. So the Arabs and the Persians entered with them, fighting, and Sadan, snatching a mace from one of the slain, wielded it in the enemy's face, and gained the city racecourse. Thence he fought his way through the foe, and broke into the king's palace, where he met with Jamak, and so smote him with the mace that he toppled senseless to the ground. Then he fell upon those who were in the palace, and pounded them into pieces, till all that were left cried out, "Quarter! Quarter!" And Sidon said to them, "Pinion your king." And Shahrazad saw the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of section 36. End of the book 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 6, by Anonymous. Translated by Richard Francis Burton.